Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Monday night. You know what that means? It's WeatherBrains. WeatherBrains episode 1005 for the 21st of April, 2025. And you know what this is. This is the pre-show. It's magical. This is the part of the program where we typically do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say outrageous things. You don't get this on the produced audio podcast version of this show. Only on the pre-show do you get this. So let's bring in everybody. Goodness, one, two, three, four, five, waiting to get in line. I must be late tonight. Yeah, I'm about 4 minutes late. Typically, I open this up about 48 or 49 after the hour, but a little tardy. So I apologize, gentlemen, for the tardiness. It's my fault. I raise my hand. It's my fault. Uh, so how's everybody?
Good to see you, Brother James. You're never tardy with me.
That's right. I agree, Flash Gordon.
Yeah, now we know who I am. Good.
Wow. I wonder how many people know I wonder how many people watching this know about Flash Gordon, who
If
that
if
is.
it's good enough for Louis Uccelini, it's good enough for me.
That's
Brandon,
true.
have you ever heard of Flash Gordon? Ever?
I've heard of it. I can't say that I know in detail really what it is. I think no, it wasn't a television show on way back when.
Way back when. You're a superhero, John Gordon.
A long time ago, Brandon, in a faraway place.
They make T-shirts about you.
Hi, Brandon. Good to
So there
see
was
you.
Yeah, hey Brandon, nice to have you on tonight.
Thank you, folks, for giving me this opportunity.
Hey, you
Well,
bet.
thank you.
Good,
Thank
good
you
to
for
see you,
don't
Stephen.
don't
entertaining
thank
me every
us.
day.
Don't thank us
Yeah,
until it's over. You might be sorry that you did this. So
this is
uh,
true.
this might be the worst night of your life. Um,
Oh, Jen won't let that happen, Brandon. Don't
No,
worry about that.
no,
Hi,
I'll try.
Jen.
uh,
Hi.
I hear you're tired. What's going on?
I'm a little tired today.
She's beating her head
Fatigue.
against the wall.
Yeah. It's this email thing. I want it fixed, but we're not there yet. So I'm trying.
Well, I think you can just set up like weatherbrains at gmail.com and then have it
So
distributed to everybody, right? I mean,
I think that's
uh,
about where we are. I'm waiting on one more thing. If we can't get there, I think we'll go there. As long as Bill Murray just gives me the thumbs up that he's ready for me just to go that route. But yeah, it should be because we all want to see it in our personal emails, but we want to see who it's coming from and reply
yes.
to that person and have it be like how it used to be. So I think we're about ready to step into that.
And we better do
That
it
would
right
just seem
now.
the easiest route to go here. I mean, I'm a simpleton, but
Yeah, I think we were trying to
sometimes sim
salvage. Yeah, we were trying to salvage that email at weatherbrains.com. And that there was one option to try to do that, and it about broke my brain to read through all the garbly goop of trying to figure that out. So it's difficult.
yeah, that, and it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it's what is
Mm-mm.
this 2025 and it's email. It's kind of old school, but
Yeah.
hey, whatever it takes,
Well, the
we'll make it
problem is
work.
everybody wants things forwarded, and that's just doesn't work anymore. And Gmail's really the reason that it doesn't work anymore. And so that's why we can't do it that way, uh, because the forwards don't work. If everybody was willing to use, Pop3 or IMAP or whatever, we could do it. But
Yeah.
not going to work because the forwards just don't work anymore. At least to Gmail.
Yeah. So I think we'll probably switch. We'll still
Well,
need to
what?
keep the other email as well because people will probably still write to it and we want to make sure we still see it. So I can just go in the back end and find out who's sending stuff. But we don't want all of us having to do that. We all want it to our personal Gmails or email addresses.
Well, I've got about 10 million addresses. I mean, really, I literally have 25 email
I know, me
addresses,
too,
and
man.
they
I do
all
too.
forward to jspan at gmail.com. I mean, it works for me. I don't. I I've not even looked at it in years, but the station email address where I work here, it goes to Gmail. It's forwarded. James at jamesspan.com, James at bigbrainsmedia.com. There's a million of them. They all go to Gmail, and it seems to work fine. So
Was it a
you guys will
spam
figure it out.
thing? Yeah, was it a spam thing, Bill? Is that what the issue
Yeah,
was?
it just
Okay.
and weatherbrains at gmail.com is not available. So either somebody just grabbed it or it's been gone
Hey,
for a while.
who did that? What
Mm,
knucklehead took our Gmail address?
poop.
Come on, man.
Ooh.
I'm still mad at
Oh.
somebody on Instagram got span in that they don't do anything with it. They're just squatters. There's no content there, none. And it's like, so I span WX, which is okay. I mean, but
Yeah.
and really when I got that Gmail address, I got jspan at gmail.com. I mean, I literally could have gotten span at gmail.com. This is the earliest of the early adopters with Gmail. And I just missed an opportunity. But people think I work for Google because my Gmail address is so short. It's just jspan at gmail.com, like tcook at apple.com. But I do not work at Google. I just got an early Gmail address. But their spam filtering seems to work really effectively. I mean, it does a very good job for me at least. And occasionally I'll look over in the spam folder and there'll literally be thousands over there. And I'll glance through them and it's all junk. They really have done a good job with the algorithm, at least for
Yeah.
me. So
We'll figure
that's
it out. It's my
huge.
goal. We're fixing it. We will fix it this week. I am on it.
This is like when John F. Kennedy said we're going to put man on the moon by the end of the decade. We're
About the same
telling
thing.
Jen we're going to get the email fixed by the end of the week. How about that?
That's right.
Or else.
Or else.
Or else.
Exactly.
Yeah. And once again, I'm the only guy on the show here old enough to remember John F. Kennedy's mandate in the 1960s. But gosh, what a cool time that was to be alive. It was weird. Like I lived through the Cuban. You think times are weird now? I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. When I was in first grade, we had to dive under these little wooden desks that the nuclear missiles were coming in, and to go through these drills, and it was terrifying. And it was just a strange time, but it was a fascinating time. The space program, that those guys in Mission Control in Houston, in the trench, they were using slide rules in the early days, which was amazing. But it's the top of the hour, and welcome. Welcome to our television viewers. It's Monday night. We got a few storms that are non-severe. We have no issues, although it's pouring rain in places, but we're good. So let's start this thing. Let's get the party started. Let's record track 1 and track 2. Hey, Stephen, can you hear us okay? Let's get a mic check real quick.
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Good job.
What a great shot. Wow, that's outstanding. The coolest background yet. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
WeatherBrains episode number 1005. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for Monday, the 21st of April, 2025. Getting awfully close to meteorological summer. I can just feel it. It's in the air where we are. It's kind of humid and muggy, and we've got scattered storms, and it's just starting to look and feel like summertime. Let's go down to Troy Kimmel, where he's already hit 107 degrees on his thermometer there.
No, 170, 170
Woo!
somewhere.
Woo!
Microwave.
Wow.
No,
Ouch.
it's pretty smooth start to the week. Trying to get kind of caught up before the weather comes back in here. Not really. I'm not sure we're going to see that much severe weather this far south. So far this year, we're barely getting any rainfall this far south. The forecast rainfall amounts there's been a bias all spring long where it's showing it overhead. It ends up falling on top of Rick and Kim. So thank you. If you don't mind, send some of that back to me. I'd appreciate that. We need that down here. But No, it's a pretty good start to the week, James.
Awesome. Rick Smith, you've had some wild weather to deal with.
Yes, it's been busy. We got a lot of really good rains. Sorry, Troy. We could share that with you. If we could, we would. Um, Too much rain in some places, some flash flooding. We've actually, I believe we're up to four flash flood fatalities in the state of Oklahoma for the weekend, two and more, and then two in northeastern Oklahoma. And then we had one tornado fatality. So we're still counting tornadoes in central Oklahoma. I think we're up to 7, something like that. So yeah, busy weekend for sure.
John Gordon, do you miss those days?
No. Rick, I'm sorry, man. For me, the Ohio River is not flooding. We are not flooding, James. The map is not green, sherbet green, and it's nice to see it. We have a nice ridge. It's nice weather. It was a good Easter. Hope you had a good Easter, James.
It was great. Thanks, John. Yeah, it was very good, peaceful time here. So let's go up to our Arctic correspondent, Jen Naramore in Ohio. So how's when are you going to send us our next? Typically down here at this latitude, we get one more little stretch of cool nights in early May. The old timers call it blackberry winter. So when are you going to send us another final shot of cool air before that nasty summer heat and humidity settles in here like a damp dish rag?
Wow. Wow. I don't know. I think we still have that chance because I'm always afraid that we're going to get something up here that's just going to make us cold. It usually happens about the time that my niece has her recital, which is that first weekend of May. And so we'll see what happens, but not anytime soon. It's really nice up here right now. We've been in the 70s, little dip tomorrow, but then we're right back up, back into the mid to upper 70s and more rain coming in too. But a few thunderstorms this morning. But outside of that, I'm loving this with the windows open and it feels great.
Yeah, and we wonder down here if the ridge is set in for the summer. I think it'll break one more time. We typically have that one break where you get storms, and then we get the blackberry winter, and then we go into summer. Hey, look who's back, Kim. Kim, how did you fare with the storms last few days?
We fared okay here. I always have mixed feelings when it's that kind of weather where you have a whole day where you have the low rumbly thunder and it's so relaxing. And I'll be honest, I needed a day like that. I needed the refreshing, open the windows, just listen to a storm. But as is on point for 2025, it came with some really sad effects just north of me. The water rescues in Moore happened not just a few miles from my house. So very Oklahoma living out here, but at least for most of the day, a good bit of refreshment happened. And that's just spring, I guess.
It's just spring, I guess. James ate a lot. How'd you fare with the storms?
About the same. A couple of tornado warnings, but they were fortunately no damage reported here. I think Rick had the confirmed tornadoes in his area. And, just dealing with the flooding for us. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what the circumstances were with the 2 flash flood fatalities up here. They're actually really close to where I live. So I'm just trying to figure some of those circumstances out. But, it's just troubling. I don't like that.
Nobody likes it. All right, Bill Murray, let's get going. It's going to be a good show. I feel good about this show.
Yeah, James always is when we have our friend Stephen Strader on. Tonight's guest, WeatherBrains Associate Professor at Villanova University, specializing in severe weather risks, societal impacts, and hazard mitigation. His research focuses on tornado and lightning exposure at large outdoor gatherings, urbanization effects on disasters, and improving public safety strategies. Dr. Stephen Strader, welcome back to WeatherBrains.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. It's always good to hear from everyone and see you all. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you always guarantee a quorum of the panel, Stephen, whenever you're coming on board for sure.
Yeah.
So we're glad to have you here.
A lot of familiar faces, and it's when I try to work with a lot of different people, you get to see a lot of people that are interested in sort of interdisciplinary work. So I'm really happy to get to share some of my research and talk to some of you. So thanks again.
Well, it's really awesome. So take us back. Some of our listeners may not have heard you on other visits. Talk about your early interest in weather and severe storms and how that has evolved and how you decided to pursue meteorology.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Evansville, Indiana, and in 2005, I was a senior in high school, and the tornado, middle of November, middle of the night, went right, about a mile south of my house and hit a manufactured housing community, and it ended up killing 20 people and became sort of EF4 tornado and shaped, it affected a family friend, and that sort of began my interest in sort of understanding these types of disasters. And fast forward here 20 years later, I'm doing that kind of research. So, very similar story to many people in our field, but yeah, childhood interest begets a career. So, I'm very lucky.
And before we go any further, Stephen, I'm going to toss it back to Jen Nairmore because my other special guest of the night, I asked her to introduce him since she knows him really well. He's here tonight because I wanted him to come on and talk about some of his cool stuff that he does a little bit later tonight. And then I got a call right there asking for a radar interpretation right before we went on, and it just totally threw me off, Jen. So I'm chasing the shiny objects over here. So why don't you introduce Brandon real quick?
Hey, you bet. Yeah, after the show last week with your pick of the week, I wrote to you immediately and I said, if you want Brandon on the show, I can get him for you. And here he is. Brandon Skalniak is a senior emergency management major at Millersville University of Pennsylvania. He's passionate about all things weather, having gained an interest in the field when he stumbled upon the Discovery Channel Storm Chasers in second grade. Brandon loves weather history and cataloging the country's significant weather events on radar, and that is your main hobby. You are also a part of the Tornado Talk Discord server. You're one of our moderators. You've actually contributed on some of our writing as well. And Brandon, it's great to have you on here, and welcome to WeatherBrains.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, you bet. So we've made you a guest panelist tonight. So hop in with questions that you have. Try not to get too distracted by the puns in the chat. And I apologize for those in advance.
Yeah, good luck, Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't apologize for James. These are comedy gold over here. That is for sure. So anyway, so sorry about that detour there, Stephen. So back to what you were talking about. So take us further and deeper here. About your research, your graduate research, and how it shaped your career and some of your biggest mentors and influences on your journey.
Yeah, I was, like I said, I was born and raised in Evansville, Indiana, and I was like every other person in my senior high school class, which was, which Indiana state school am I going to go to? And I ended up going to Indiana University, where mainly at that point in my life, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a music major, I wanted to be an art major, and then I liked science, and I kind of fell back into meteorology because of that tornado when I was a senior in high school, and then at a recommendation from Dr. Scott Robeson, who's a climatologist at IU, said, "Hey, why don't you check out this Northern Illinois University and look at this Walker Ashley guy?" And I talked to him and ended up going there for master's degree and stuck around for my PhD, and been doing research on a lot of different severe weather hazards, mainly tornadoes ever since, and continue to collaborate with people like Walker and Kim and others as well. So I've just continued to do that work. As in 2016, I came to Villanova University, and I haven't really stopped hitting the ground running yet. So yeah, it goes fast, but at the same time, I always wish there was more time to do more work on the stuff that I enjoy so much.
That's when you know you're doing the right thing. When it's not work at all. Can't wait to get up every day. So talk about what attracted you to Villanova and the program there.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. When you're a PhD and student, you want to go into academia to be a researcher and a teacher, you apply for the jobs that are available. And I got very lucky that I left straight from PhD to go be an assistant professor at Villanova. And when I applied for the job, before I applied for it, I had to Google where it was, right? I didn't know where it was. And I'm the first one they hired like me that's a meteorologist and a geographer. And and all those things at Villanova, and I've just made the best of it. So it's coming from the Midwest and going to the East Coast, and sort of the Philadelphia region was a big change, but I've been here ever since, and I enjoy it. And even though my heart's still back in sort of severe weather country, we make the best of it.
And James has drawn a correlation there to IU and Bobby Knight. So the basketball's not too bad there either, is it, Stephen?
No, that's always the joke, is like wherever I go, seems like right before I accepted the job at Villanova, they won the NCAA tournament in 2016. And then 2 years later, I had 4 classes canceled that I teach because they made it to the Final Four and the president canceled classes. They won the championship, they canceled classes. We had a snow day, and then they had the parade. So that was an interesting semester, but it's a small school, so when you do something big, everything shuts down. It was a really interesting time, and hopefully greener pastures ahead for Villanova in terms of basketball.
Yeah, well, amazing times, that's for sure. And certainly a hard nut for Alabama to crack in the Final Four too. And Kim, we get to play you again this year as we talk about basketball brains for a minute. We get to play Purdue this year again, so we're looking forward to that down here in Alabama. I don't think we'll be as good as we've been the last couple of years, but you never know.
That's the beauty of it. That's why you play the games, because interesting stuff happens. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But Stephen, we followed your tornado research extensively, of course. And you've written extensively and researched extensively on what factors are driving changes in tornado impacts and vulnerability. Touch on those for a while for us here for a few minutes, because they're always near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. A lot of people like to think in black and white terms, like this is the cause for people dying in tornadoes. And unfortunately, what we see in places like the Southeast is that there's not one thing we can point our finger at for tornado deaths and impacts. It's a lot of little things like seasonality. Like the Southeast has a low tone risk throughout of tornadoes all year. It's a lot more nocturnal tornadoes, a high percentage of manufactured housing, high poverty rates, and it becomes this sort of really difficult problem to tackle from one perspective. So a lot of my work is interdisciplinary and looking at sort of the engineering effects, the social science and the physical, the meteorology and the climatological factors of why we see tornado impacts kind of going up over time, and tornado mortality flatlining. And in the Southeast, it's actually increasing for the first time since the 1920s. And there's a lot of causes for that, but it's something that we've learned over the last 15, 20 years, that it's not something that all meteorologists can solve in isolation. We need a lot of people that cross disciplinary boundaries to come up with creative solutions to help people. So it's a very interesting field, and it pays off when you hear the good stories, but it can be frustrating when you hear the bad things, people passing away or not receiving a warning or not being able to take shelter. Those are the tricky things. So yeah, our work's focused on that a lot from both climate and societal change perspectives. And there's certainly a lot more to do.
What are some of the biggest factors you've tracked and that you're seeing in the process?
Yeah, the number one thing that we see across the entire country for a lot of hazards is our growing exposure. There's just more people, more things, more homes to hit than ever before. And that means, this is the work that we did at Northern Illinois with Walker Ashley and others, is that as our societies and our cities grow and expand, I mean, look at the, southern suburbs of Oklahoma City, look at Atlanta suburbs, look at all these different suburban areas that continue to expand and grow, means that the tornado that went through a cornfield 50 years ago is now going through the heart of a brand new subdivision, as I've said many times before. And that means impacts are going up. But in terms of the deaths, what's really critical, unfortunately, is the manufactured housing in the Southeast. There's laws and standards and engineering requirements that are not quite strong enough when you have a significant tornado that comes knocking at the door. And unfortunately, we've learned that the engineering side of things means that these homes don't can't withstand the significant tornado winds, and if they fail at the floor or the base of the foundation, and they get thrown into the woods with people in them. And then from a social science standpoint, we learn that a lot of people don't have the ability to take shelter. They don't know where to go, or if they do know where to go, they have no way to get there, and we're asking a lot. So it's a very interesting aspect that overlaps with a lot of vulnerabilities in the Southeast. And those are the big two we focus a lot on, but there's other factors. Like I said before, nocturnal tornado percentages are much higher in the Southeast. There's a seasonality, more quasi-linear convective systems that move through that area that produce tornadoes that are harder to see. The list goes on and on and on. So there's no shortage of work needed.
Yeah, we battled the manufactured housing situation in Alabama and the Southeast, along with other parts of the country too. But it's very frustrating. Do you see safety rules changing in any way in terms of what our messaging is for residents of manufactured housing? Because we say all the time it's wonderful, affordable housing, for people, and it's an economic reality, but they can be death traps in severe weather.
Yeah, so the point is not to vilify the manufactured housing industry. Nobody wants to see people in homes being killed, period, especially if it's your home that you built. The problem that we have is that a lot of times there's a balance, as you mentioned, between affordable housing and safety and materials. And what we found, specifically working with Dr. David Roosh, who many of you know is a wind engineer at Auburn University, is that just increasing the standards for the anchoring to the ground can make a huge difference to these homes. And the tricky part of implementing that is the blame game of whose job is it to do that. The manufacturer will say it's not our job, it's the wholesaler, because they have to pick an anchoring system. And then we have to trust that the anchoring system is proper and put in place, and there's soil samples, and that it's the right system for the soil. And then there's also corrosion that happens over time to those anchoring systems. So there's this question of okay, where's the responsibility lie? And a lot of times it's hard for the person living in the structure to inspect, update, and keep it up, because it's already, a lot of times they're living in poverty or they don't have the financial means to do that. So we're seeing a lot of action on nonprofits and from the insurance groups that are coming in to help with some of that. But I would always like to see codes stronger, much like what Florida had after 1992 with Hurricane Andrew. Is let's just make all manufactured homes the highest we have in terms of wind zone and FEMA regulations. The reality is most of our manufactured homes that are subject to tornado damage aren't near the coast anyway. So we have all of them in parts of the Southeast, the Central Plains, that are just subject to whatever the local code is, which is probably not as strong as it could be. So finding an affordable way to keep those homes anchored would go a long way to improving this as a whole. So it's tricky how you do that too, because there's a lot of politics and economics involved.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, can I jump in real quick?
Please, John, please. I was just going to ask if you wanted to bring that comment to the forefront there.
Yeah, Stefan. I mean, I talked to Tim Marshall. Most people don't know this, but Florida took 7 times to pass. The amount of money going in to kill that was unbelievable. And it wasn't the thing that finally tipped it. I don't know if you know this, was not a hurricane. It was the 98 tornado outbreak, the one by Disney World.
Yeah.
That's what did it. It's amazing. The hurricane does so much more damage on a wide scale, but it was a tornado event. I think it was February. Is that right, Brandon? February 98? Okay, yeah, all right. But anyway, I didn't know if you knew that, but anytime any state legislature is up for home improvement or mobile home or whatever it is, the outside interest is staggering. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. It's hard because, again, you have that push-pull between the economics, who has the political power, and sort of the engineering component of it. Some of the homes have gotten a lot better, but we can see that even in the same neighborhoods, homes side by side may have different anchoring, or there could be some tornado dynamics that means that something gets hit with the mesovortice and has slightly stronger winds and debris loading. There's a lot of factors. Where I see a lot of movement is in the insurance industry that I hope trickles down to the manufactured housing is something like with what Ian Giamanco and them do at the IBHS group, where they look at the weakness point of like a single family house, and a lot of times it's the garage door. And if that gets blown in, then the whole roof can get lifted off. So something like a couple $100 to reinforce your door, you can pay for it up front. The insurance will give you the money back because of the rebates. So we see a lot of that happening with hail. And I hope that would trickle down into the manufactured homes. The challenge we have is the insurance industry doesn't care. I don't want to say doesn't care, but on their, in terms of list of importance, manufactured homes are not up there because it's not a huge financial loss. So it's hard to get that incentive. So the biggest thing we push for now is sheltering, is people need places to go. And that's a unique challenge for the Southeast because we did a study a few years ago and learned that 80% of manufactured homes in Alabama are not in manufactured or mobile home parks. They are on isolated plots of land in the rural parts of the county. And the question for emergency managers was, okay, we're going to build a community shelter. Where do we put it? Because the lead time is 13 minutes. Takes 20 minutes to get to the shelter. It's 2 a.m. You have 2 kids at home. Your car may not start. You don't have gas in it. And you got to be at work at 7 a.m. What are you going to do? Is the shelter going to be open? That's what we're asking people to do. So that's the social science part of it. And that's kind of the challenge of pulls your hair out. I don't have any to pull out because I've already done all that.
Well, Stephen, what I've always appreciated about your work, especially as a collaborator of yours, is just how much you do dive into all of these really important nuances of the problem. These are tough problems, and it's really, I think we do ourselves and our hearts a disservice by imagining that the solutions are easy when they actually are somewhat complicated. You've touched on a number of issues about sheltering and access that your work just really did a great job of revealing a couple of years ago, and something that I'm curious about that I'm sure our listeners may be thinking about. 2 different dimensions. One, can you talk a little bit about why there are no requirements for, even if it's not a large share of the manufactured mobile housing population in the Southeast, why aren't there requirements to have shelters where those parks exist? Or why aren't there requirements for communities that have a lot of these, kinds of housing to have something for, some place for those people to go to that's close? That's sort of part A. And part B, I'm hoping you can cover what Alabama has considered with the Safer Places law and thinking about future directions.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer your part B because I'm not that informed on that yet. I've been out of the world for the last couple of years in manufactured homes, kind of working on other stuff, but I'm coming back. But your first question, you know, the challenge I think a lot of times it comes down to our cognitive biases. Is Kim, a lot about these, about how we perceive threats. And, being hit by a tornado is still a low probability event. And a lot of people are having to fork out a lot of money and go, is the cost benefit worth it? Do we roll the dice? It's the gambler's fallacy. It's never happened here. Why is it going to happen now? And that causes people to pause on building shelters. The other problem we've seen is that we've talked to people like, hey, emergency managers, at the state level and county level, and say, if we gave you money to build a shelter, could you build one? And they would say, if we had the money to build a shelter, we'd fix our roads, we'd fix our school books, we need it for other stuff. So we're talking, razor thin budget lines. That a great story that we heard at the integrated warning team meeting that we had a few years ago now, in Central Alabama was. We were talking about is the need for no weather radios gone because everybody gets wireless emergency alerts from their cell phone. And then a couple emergency managers from rural Alabama said, doesn't work. Half my county doesn't have cell phone reception. And I was like, oh, it's not the same everywhere. So you learn those lessons and you can cross disciplinary boundaries. But yeah, I don't know much, Kim, about the Alabama specific path forward. Can you enlighten us a little bit, maybe?
Oh, sure. Well, I apologize for bringing you, something out of left field a little bit there. It was something that happened just after we had that integrated warning team meeting in Alabama, because I mean, in part, I think motivated by the results of your work. There's a question that it begs about, gosh, what can we do? We can't just do nothing. And yes, people might not be able to reach an official FEMA rated shelter in time within the warning period. But is that all we can do? And part of what your work revealed was that, okay, if people aren't living in mobile home parks, then there's a lot of this like mobile home next to a permanent home by another mobile home, or like you were talking about in your research, there being family groups where there'd be a permanent home and then a set of manufactured mobile housing like on site. And people, the idea is that a lot of people would go to their family home to shelter. Could we do something good by making a Good Samaritan law where if people come to your house or site-built structure to shelter, it's maybe not perfect, but gosh, it does so much better by and large for every tornado that exists except for a small number. It's going to do so much better and be so much more accessible. So that was the idea. It was a Good Samaritan law that reduced the liability if you allowed people to shelter in your house.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would fully support that. And actually, work that we did with Dr. Kevin Ash, who's at University of Florida, he interviewed a lot of people that lived in manufactured homes and had them complete surveys. And he found an interesting paradox. The people that live in permanent homes that actually would do better sheltering in their own home felt like they needed to get to a shelter and could do so. The people living in manufactured homes know they're not safe, but they lacked the self-efficacy to actually shelter and go somewhere. So there's this mismatch of they know they're not safe as they should be, but they don't know where to go. And one of the things we learned is that they turn to their neighbors first. They might run across the street to the neighbor that they trust with a permanent home. And also in the Southeast, the religious institutions are critical to disseminate that information and being a community staple. It's not the county court, it's not the school. A lot of times it's the churches that are in the rural areas that can be that sort of the old school phone tree and get information out there. So I'm a huge I think data is power, and we're working right now, myself and Dr. Alex Haberly at Northern Illinois University. We're working on developing a national manufactured housing database that will actually provide really good information about specifically where these homes are located that could be used in these outreach events and say, hey, if there's these family pods where there's 4 or 5 homes together, maybe that's a target for a little small shelter that would protect them. And then, identifying where is important, but also I think the more important is how do you pay for it, and how do you get those things installed? And that's really the $1 billion question. And I'm not sure how to answer that at this point because it's tough. It's really hard. And that's typically where I pass it off to my friends in the policymaker world.
James A., you pick up the conversation there, and then we'll go to John Gordon's got a quick comment, and then I want to hear Rick's story.
Yeah, Dr. Strader, thanks again for joining us. And my question, to jump back to building codes, how long, if we strengthen the building codes, more did it after the 2013 tornado? They pushed that base wind up to 130-ish, I think, maybe 115. The question is, how long does it take for strengthening building codes to have a community-wide effect? Because I presume that's only for new construction or for big remodels, something like that.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. To me, it's not enough in places in the Southeast where we see mortality being so much higher than other parts of the country to tornadoes. I think that you need to have new construction that's improved and built with better standards and better implementation of anchoring standards. But we also need a retrofitting process and an inspection process because, again, high humidity levels with steel straps in the Southeast mean corrosion. It means rust, and that means that they break when the tornado comes. So it's a slow process. I'm not familiar with the outline. A lot of that data and information is kind of hidden out of view from people like me, and it's proprietary to the industry. But I suspect that it's very similar to sort of word of mouth, is that if you find your neighbors are doing this, if you look across the street and your neighbors are installing solar panels on their roof, maybe you're going to take a second chance and go talk to your neighbor and go, hey, why are you doing this? How are you doing this? And you hope it spreads that way. But it's tough because, again, what we're also learning is a lot of these people in manufactured homes are getting to a point where they go, I thought we had the greatest anchoring standards, and they do based on the law and the requirements, but unfortunately it's not strong enough. So to this point, people like myself, David Roosh, and others in the field, if someone comes up to me and says, hey, what do I need to do to improve my manufactured home standards for anchoring? I say, pretend like you live in Miami County, like Miami-Dade, and build put it to those standards, and that's the best you can do. Don't think twice about it, because if you're going to stay there for more than the mortgage of your life, you can sell that down the road too. So it's sometimes a lot for them to ask money up front to do that, but it is challenging. So it's a slow process, and it's getting harder to do, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, Dr. Strader, this is John. Just a quick comment. I don't know. Have you ever been invited to a manufactured home conference or a home building conference? Because Rick Smith and I have done hundreds and hundreds of surveys. We often become the villain.
Yeah.
Okay. We're the villain. We're the villain because we don't understand what tornadoes are. And if they would just spend a little money, screws, bolts, nuts, base plates, anchor joists. I've seen the industry standard, just for example, on the studs is 16 inches. 16 inches. I bring a tape measure now. I don't know if you do, Rick, because I've seen 46 inches. And then they wonder why their house went to see Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. So have you ever been invited to a conference? Because Marshall says if you spend about $750, I'm talking about a regular home. He says you will withstand an EF2. You will. Period.
Yeah, they don't invite me to those things. They don't like me too much because I'm pretty forward with my opinion on manufactured housing in terms of the quality. I don't want to vilify them, but at the same time, I've given talks on the research showing statistics. The reality is 6 to 7% of the U.S. housing stock is manufactured homes. Over 50% of all tornado deaths occur in manufactured homes. That's a fact. Like, there is no argument to that. But if I don't say manufactured home and I slip up and say mobile home, they stand up in the back of the room and start yelling at me and get escorted out. It's happened twice. So yeah, they don't like that. And I don't want to vilify them. I can't change it myself. Only they can. So I'm trying to say, hey, this is in your interest too. And I'm doing my best to be sort of the golden rule here and follow it. But it's a challenge. And unfortunately, it hurts the people that aren't educated on the process when they go to buy the home. And then that's the deaths that we see. And when it's kids and the elderly, it affects you emotionally, and it makes me mad. So of course I'm passionate about it, but it's a hard thing to get to buy in because, again, profits. Yeah.
Stephen, this is Rick and Norman. First of all, I'm a huge fan. Anything that's got your name on it, I'm reading, I'm sharing it. Great stuff. Always fascinated by all your work. You talked about the social sciences, and it's even more complicated when you start to bring, as is everything, when you start to bring people into the equation. I spent my Easter Sunday doing an Easter egg hunt in Pontotoc County and Hughes County, Oklahoma. Not really. It was a damage survey, but and this is not the first time this has happened, but we had one fatality, a tornado fatality, and it was in a mobile home, manufactured home. This was a double wide mobile home, effectively sitting on concrete blocks, cinder blocks. We found one anchor that had sheared off, and we couldn't find any other straps or anything else that had anchored the mobile home down. What made this heartbreaking was this was a married couple in their 80s. They had been in that mobile home less than 6 months. They had a brand new, sparkling, shiny storm shelter, underground storm shelter, and I measured it was about 50 feet from the front door of the mobile home. Relatives got enough warning to drive from wherever they were to this mobile home and to beg those people to take shelter in that storm shelter that was 50 feet from the front door. They refused, and I don't know if it was what the reason was exactly, but they shut the door. The rest of the family got in a shelter, and unfortunately, the 84-year-old man in the mobile home died, and his wife was transported to the trauma center in Oklahoma City. We hear these stories so often, and you hear different reasons. You hear that people are too proud. I've lived here all my life and I've never seen a tornado. I'm going to be fine. Or the fatalistic, if it's my time, it's my time. I'm sure that you've looked or heard of some of that in the Southeast, and it's not just limited to the Southeast, obviously. That plays a role in people's decision making too, right? I mean, have you looked into that or experienced that yourself in your research?
Yeah, we've done some of that. But I'm always the person that's partnering with people like Kim, who are the real experts in the social science realm of things. And we see that a lot. And there's been debate in the last decade or so about, is fatalism still a thing? And a lot of people say it's not. And I disagree. I think it's still a very prominent thing, especially I see it in my own dad. And my dad just turned 70, and I hear about those things, and I say, hey, there's gonna be severe weather tonight, get ready, have your weather radio on. And he's like, yeah, it kind of blows it off. And a lot of it is because it's that cognitive bias that we have, and it's really tough to understand the decision making. I think the real problem we have a lot of times is the National Weather Service is doing their job. They're getting the warnings out. We're seeing more people get the warnings than ever before. And I hate when we hear the first person that the news people pick out to say the warning didn't happen. We didn't get the warning. The sirens didn't go off. I'm like, that's the outlier anymore. So what we have to be better at is understanding how people are making decisions, and that's a difficult thing to get that gets beyond my skill set. But yeah, we see that a lot with people when there's some other factor at play in terms of priority list, whether it's mobility, whether again it's pride, maybe it's sort of thinking they know more than they do. So there's a hubris there of like, oh, it's not going to hit us. There's an event that happened in April 9th in 2014 in Northern Illinois. It was the Fairdale, Illinois tornado. And that was a really interesting event that I was a PhD student. I drove 20 minutes from my house and saw a violent EF4 tornado. And then the next morning, I got to go with the National Weather Service to do the damage survey. So I have the whole tornado life cycle, photos, video, and then we also have the damage. And we learned that the two ladies that died in Fairdale were neighbors. The one lady said her daughter kept begging her to go to the basement. She said, I'm not going to the basement because there's spiders down there and I'm afraid of spiders. And the walls collapsed and she died. And then the other lady did take shelter in her bathroom and in the bottom floor, but her husband went upstairs and filmed the tornado coming right towards their house. And some of you have seen this video. Clem Schultz, it's a famous video. He's since passed, but he was watching the tornado as it's coming right towards him, and it threw his whole house and completely destroyed everything. And his wife died, but he survived. And what was interesting is we talked to him after that, and he said the left to right motion of the tornado as it's coming towards him made him think it was going to go north of him. So he perceived, even up to the last minute, as it was entering the town, and homes 100 feet from him were starting to be lifted and thrown, he still thought he was going to be okay until it was too late. And it was this sort of, we've seen tornadoes before, but we haven't seen one like this. And it was a little small farming community, 3 blocks by 3 blocks. So I don't know. It's tough. It's sort of like I can lead you to water, but I can't force you to drink.
There's so much in all of that. Something that is so interesting. You mentioned the environmental cues and how people are thinking about them and understanding them. And I've really appreciated Julie DeMuth has partnered with a number of other researchers to look at environmental cues and what are people thinking and seeing. And, we've sort of known that the environmental cues are important, but knowing if people have an accurate understanding of what they're looking at, that is a much more complicated thing. So if we're going to speak to it, gosh, yeah, it's important to know if there are certain things that can throw people off. Um, that you just mentioned one that I think is really interesting. I found another when I was doing the April 27th study. in my PhD, and that was that people didn't know that tornadoes could look like a wall. They thought that it was just rain coming at them because they expected to see the Dorothy from Twister thing. And, when they're really bad, actually, they probably just look like a wall of black. And that's just not part of our mental model. So you raise a number of really important things. I do want to say, Rick, your story about what happened with the older folks in Oklahoma is heartbreaking. And when I saw that, it did raise for me, Stephen, this debate in our community about fatalism. It's been a really active debate. And I think one of the things that's tough is we just don't have really good evidence that is broad spanning. So you get some researchers that have gone in the field and seen some of that through whatever means, whether it be their methodology or they just incidentally come upon people who espouse those views, some who have not. The samples are all fairly limited. And so I think our field is at a bit of a standstill. We don't really know the degree to which that kind of idea, right? That worldview plays into response. So I think at heart, when I hear things like that, what I really wish we had, and what I hope, even with what's going on now, what I hope we can start to gravitate toward is thinking about social science in our operational world, and that it could exist to help give us some of that more systematic epidemiological, like behavioral determinants of death, kind of evidence, so we can answer some of these questions and just know, is there something more we could have done, and know where to draw the line. If you inform somebody and they have a really good sense of what's going to happen, our meteorologists need to know that they did everything that they could. And I don't know. I'd love your thoughts, Stephen, on something like that. You find yourself in a really tough area of work where you clearly wrestle with the realities of the world, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, two thoughts that come to mind. First one is that, at some point, it's tough. You can't save everybody, like a lot of times, because it comes down to an individual choice. And that kind of leads me into like what I think about a lot of this is from a social science perspective and understanding decision making when the tornado threats arise and any hazard. We're behind the eight ball when it comes to the physical science. The physical science has been worked on for decades now. So we're playing catch up. So we're just learning that other side of the coin in the last 10 or 15 years. And just like trying to figure out and understand, sort of the origins of mesocyclones and how you produce tornado, that same fight on the physical side is kind of where we're at with the safety side and decision making. So it's tough. I think you're right. A lot of the social science that we do for years was thought as being cheap. You couldn't do it. You could do it cheaply. And we're learning no, because one community may behave differently than another, and people are different. I always tell my students that when we talk about exposure to a tornado, it's easy to count people and homes. But as soon as we start talking about what types of homes, what types of people, what do they believe in, what are their, once it becomes infinite. It becomes this abyss of sort of what forms their decision making, and a lot of it can be related to how they grew up and why they grew up, and those are the things that we're going to learn more over the next 20-30 years. But you just try to push the envelope a little bit and try not to sort of, as my dad would say, eat the whole elephant in one bite. We're just trying to push it, throw a few grains of sand on the beach, and hopefully at some point it'll end up being a dune. That's the hope.
And just as an observation, Bill wanted me to throw it in. When we talk about the complexity of risk perception, Rick's office's message was the same that was received by this family in the mobile home and the fatality from the mobile home, and all took completely different protective action decisions. And you even had the family trying to influence the man in the mobile home to get in the shelter too, which is normally a very strong influence on protective action, which goes back to what you were saying, be part of that network, make calls. We saw it in Mayfield too. Calls are critical from your network.
Yeah, what we've learned from the social science standpoint really quick is that people always seek secondary confirmation. So if they get the warning, they go look for confirmation. And a lot of times I tell all my students the number one thing you can do is have someone with credibility giving them the message. So someone like James is someone they trust a lot, more than they trust me. I'm just a lowly professor researcher. But if the credibility is there and they're getting the message, that's when we see a more unified action taking. So having those people that are credible in the field to disseminate that information is really important to getting people to act fast and make sure that the secondary confirmation they're seeking is quick and not like calling up people and so on.
And just kind of tying on to James's comment, I think that's one of the most frustrating parts for me, talking to the family there. It is that social warning that's usually one of the strongest triggers for people. Yep. They may not believe what's on TV. They may not be watching TV. They may not have gotten a cell phone alert, or they've been in 10 tornado warnings. They don't believe it's going to happen. But a lot of times the final straw is that relative saying, no, you really need to do something this time. And it's just so frustrating and sad when that doesn't happen. There was another relative, I think a child of the family that was in the mobile home that lived 200 or 300 yards to the west of them, I think, that she had no idea anything was going on, and she had already gone to bed, and thankfully she was not seriously injured. So it's just it's always fascinating to me. One of the most valuable parts of any damage survey is that stuff. It's talking to people and learning about how they got the message, what they did, but it's also at the same time sometimes the most depressing and disturbing when you just realize over and over again how complicated this whole process is.
So two quick things. First one is that when we're looking at tornado deaths, the deaths are easy to count. Injuries are easy, not as easy, but they're easy to count. Survivability is what we really want. We want the denominator, because those survival stories tell us a lot about what people did right, and maybe were they lucky, or did they actually make a decision. That information is a lot of times hard to get, because after the disaster, people are displaced and you can't get a hold of them and talk to them, and that requires you to get boots on the ground and go into the damage path, like someone like David Roosh has done, and others, and Tim Marshall. But that's hard to do. It takes a lot of time, and you may not be led into those areas and so on. So that's an important thing to get. What we learn is that when there's a non-routine trigger, that's what causes people to take action. When they look outside and they see the tree limb flying, when it gets really dark or the power goes out, that's when they take action, is that non-routine thing that happens and causes them to take shelter.
Jen Naramore, it seems to me, over my history of reading tornado accounts, and you've read many, many more than me, usually the hard-headed man is the one who says, I'm going to bed, I'm not worried about this. Has that been your experience? A lot of times the men are more hard-headed than the women, or is that too broad of a generality?
From my reading, that seems to be the case. Sadly, it's usually the woman is trying to get her husband or partner or whatever to go to the basement to get off the couch or whatever it may be, or they're on the phone with them and trying to get them to go to the shelter. So that does seem to be the case. In most of what I've read, and it's interesting to me to listen to this conversation. I was just thinking how some of the reasoning today is still some of the reasoning I've read that happened 200 years ago. It's the same thinking, and it's interesting to me, and it's usually the women or the mothers or whatever that are trying to gather all the chickens together to try to keep everybody safe, and the men are, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical or anything, but that's just what it seems to be, are standing there waiting to see what's going to happen and not taking the shelter. So yeah.
The best way you can see that gender bias in the data is if you look at lightning deaths. Lightning deaths are well above and beyond male over female if you split them into sort of binary fields. And that, even though we don't have as many lightning deaths as tornado deaths, it's a lot of it's risk-taking behavior, jobs, it's mentality. We see that come in that field as well.
Yeah, Kim, any comments on the hard-headed men idea? I know you've been out researching a lot too, and you've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's
Get him, Kim.
I may know a hard-headed guy or two. And I mean, no, it's sufficiently pervasive as to be a like almost a humorous truism in disaster sociology. I've heard a number of members of faculty of various natural hazard center, disaster research center institutions where they're disaster sociologists, and they comment on the gendered nature of this, where their sociology study not just how people make decisions as individuals, but how they make decisions as groups, and how your identity, like these different aspects of your identity, influence your decision making, especially in disaster situations. And there is very much a gendered nature to how we go about these things. There's an international gender disaster network built around both how women in particular they take on the preparedness role more often. They also take a much stronger role in recovery in so many ways for their families. And so, the question is in some sense investing in women and how to do that if we want to invest in preparedness and recovery. And that's so often overlooked. There's a role for all of us. We all do different things, but men, it's so known as to be incorporated into insurance rates, right? Like driving, this shows up too. Men are more risk seeking in almost every facet of life, and you pay a higher premium for that. So yes, it also shows up in how we respond to warnings.
I mean, we see it in the medical field all the time. My friend's a doctor, and it's just a continual, drives him nuts that men refuse to go to the doctor until a medical intervention becomes very harsh or maybe even too late, and just preventable stuff if it's caught early. So yes, man, go to the doctor.
Well, it's not been that way for me since I was old enough to remember storms. I've been the one yelling, "Let's go to the basement. Let's get in the shelter. Let's herd everybody into the laundry Saturday night. This is what I do." So not a problem for me for sure. John Gordon, talk about flash flooding. I was watching News 9 in Oklahoma City Saturday night when somebody just came plowing into a giant flash flood right on camera. And, David Payne looked at him, took his glasses off and said, "Folks, this is how you die." And, what do you do? What do you do? There's fire trucks, fire engines blocking the road, news crews, police cars, a sea of water across the road, cars floating in the water. What do you do, John Gordon?
Yeah. It's nuts. Dr. Strader. So the best communicator I know in weather is James Spann. And we have so many really good people on here. And what happened again in Oklahoma this weekend? We had flash flood deaths. They happen in Alabama and Kentucky and Missouri and Illinois. They go all over the place. Sometimes you have to change your tactic. What can we be doing that we're not doing, Dr. Strader, to stop this insanity? I actually said on the air a couple of weeks ago, I'll hand you money not to go through water. I had pennies everywhere. I'll give you money not to do this. What can we do? What are we not doing?
I think that's literally a $1 billion question. I don't know. I start off my lecture in my natural hazards course talking about risk-taking behavior, and I show a video from like 1992 in Southwest Arizona, where you see this little hatchback car come driving down the road, and there's a big roaring flash flood, and all they have to do is stop and not cross. What do? They drive right into it. The car flips upside down and they get washed away. It was obvious what was going to happen, but I asked my students, what were they thinking in that moment? And I think a lot of times what we learn is that they've taken a risk once before and they came out okay, so they're willing to do it again. They drove through the water that they thought wasn't too deep and they made it out okay. This time they didn't. So some of this is just making sure people understand the true risk that they're facing. But I don't know how you get past that bias of sort of the gambler's fallacy or sort of anything. One of my favorite things to do is if you Google search, cognitive biases, look at the long list of them. That's what we're up against. We're up against all these biases that we all have. every single person here, probably when the tornado warning hits or the storm's nearing, we don't run to our basement. We look out the window first, and we have our own bias as meteorologists. So it's tough. I don't know how to solve those things because that's like saying, how do you solve depression? How do you solve anxiety? A lot of it is very in tune to who people are at their core. It's tough.
Unmute myself here. Yeah, Jen, you have a story from a listener that kind of will be a good segue into what I want to talk. Because why I asked Stephen here tonight was to talk about his work with large groups and large gatherings, large outdoor gatherings. So we want to transition into that because this was a very important and germane discussion, but we want to cover this too. So this is kind of a good transition, Jen. Why don't you talk about that email that we got last week?
Okay, yeah, this came in from Brad Miser. The subject line was "This story has Kim written all over it," smiley face. But it has to do with tornado warnings that occurred, when we had that active period. And wild video shows band continuing to play on downtown Nashville rooftop as tornado sirens blare. And the gentleman who wrote this article, started off by saying, let me start out by saying you shouldn't ignore a tornado warning. So he did say that, and then kind of went through the litany list of all the different warnings that came through and how essentially got to the point of fatigue of tornado warnings. And they were happening at night. So he said, the first one woke me up at 2:30 on Thursday morning, and then another followed shortly. And by about 5:30, I had decided that it was in God's hands and just silenced my phone and went back to sleep after no less than 4 tornado warnings and 6 phone calls from the Metro Nashville Emergency Alert System. And then they continued to, have the storms come through because it's so active. And then they had bands on Broadway that were just kept playing, and somebody had a TikTok video where the band was still playing, and the storms you could see the storms in the background, all ominous looking, and there were some bars that had people go to the basement, but some didn't. So there's a lot to unpack there because you see some of these videos, and there's everybody's on the roof listening to the band, having a beer, and they're watching the storms roll through while the sirens are going, and it's just crazy. And so obviously such active weather, warning fatigue comes into it, people not understanding what's happening, or they just don't care anymore. And it's a lot to unpack. So Stephen, we'll just throw it to you, and I'd love to hear some stuff from Kim too on this, as we segue into this more of a, what do we do when we have big groups and we have this type of a scenario?
Well, gosh, can't wait, Stephen, for your thoughts. This is layered.
No, it's tough. Our study that we just published, we didn't even get down to that. We were already over the linked requirements for the journal, so we couldn't even dive down into the decision making. And what we did learn was in these large outdoor gatherings, and we limited to only outdoor gatherings that have more than 10,000 people in attendance. So something like that wouldn't even be captured in our data set because there's just so many of them. Like pick a random night on, Broadway, or pick a random night on Bourbon Street. Like it's going to have a lot of people. What we learned was the rules for these large outdoor gatherings, whether it's MLB, Major League Baseball, whether it's NASCAR, whether it's the Indianapolis 500, the PGA, individual concert venues, the rules are different for everyone. Much like how we view like siren policies and tornadoes is it's different from county to county, it's different from venue to venue, and that kind of confuses the public a little bit. And we've had plenty of cases where at these large outdoor events where we've had lightning or a severe event or we've had very close calls where tornadoes have, like in 2004, I think the Indianapolis 500, tons of people in the stands, tornado 5 miles away. Like, what if that tornado goes right through the heart of the stadium or the racetrack, right in the middle of the race, right? You can't get the people out of there. And if you do get them out of the stands, they're in their vehicles. And traffic doesn't move instantly. So we dove into it a little bit, which I'm happy to talk about. But of course, I'd love to hear some thoughts on the social science side of that as well.
Talk about the risk metric that you and your co-author developed, the risk ranking metric, Stephen.
Yeah, that was, it's not the best. It could be a lot more detailed, but what we wanted to capture was the seasonality of these events. Like, for instance, Major League Baseball, right? It's a summertime sport. You don't need to worry about, Coors Field in December unless there's a concert or something there. So we wanted to capture the seasonality. So we looked at calculating these indices on a monthly basis. And then we wanted to capture the location of where these large outdoor gatherings occur. How many days are they open? So, like, for instance, amusement parks are open 7 days a week. That's a lot of days where there's a lot of people exposed to lightning and tornadoes. But, some like high school football games, you may have 2 home games in a month, right? So it depends. So our industry tried to capture not only how many people are at these events, how many events are there, and then sort of rank them based on their climatology. So our project in general, first thing we did was we created a monthly lightning climatology across the US, sort of January, February, March. What regions get the greatest number of cloud to ground lightning flashes? And so on. And then we match that with those venues, and we can actually calculate a score of how risky is your venue or your large outdoor gathering to lightning or a tornado, which we did. So we found some interesting results, but we found some, the obvious cases are there, but we also found some interesting fringe cases that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. And I keep thinking we're getting lucky, because if we have a significant tornado roll through a large parade or something, it could be, we're looking at 1,000-person death potentially. I mean, I think it's possible if you have that many people outside and you have no way of getting them into safety.
Brandon, you are going to bring up something that I wanted to make sure that Stephen talked about. So please ask your question.
Oh, I didn't really have a question. I just had a comment. One of the more notable recent lightning fatalities in my state, Pennsylvania, was back in 2012 at a large sporting venue. It was at a NASCAR race at Pocono, and their policy with that sport is, I believe it's lightning detected within 8 miles of the track. At least nowadays it is. I believe it was changed after this incident, but they had called the race due to incoming inclement weather, and I believe it was one fan was killed and 5 were injured in the parking lots due to a bolt ahead of the line.
Yeah, that I remember that event, and that was
Mhm.
my first argument to this whole process was, okay, people are out of the stands, but now where are they? At a NASCAR track, they're going to be in the infield. They're going to be out in the parking lots. They're going to wait to go back in. They're not going away. They're going to be out tailgating and having a good time. They're not any safer there. So really, I think the call was liability. I hate to say that, but a lot of times I think it is. And also you can't evacuate instantly, right? You need lead time to get people out. And then a lot of people are going to have that cognitive bias that kicks in and goes, well, this is going to pass through. I'm going to stay here and take my chance. So it really is a gamble. It is a gamble that, frankly, they're winning more often than not. But that one time that they lose, and by they I mean these events, these venues, it's bad. So I think what we're seeing a lot of times, if the threat is big enough in the days and maybe the 24 hours before, the whole thing gets canceled in general. And that keep people from coming, and you won't have to evacuate. I think we're seeing that taken more often, like sort of like how we approach sometimes school cancellations, right? When severe weather's coming. So it's tough. And it's not just the NASCAR races. We've seen similar events at, high school football. We've seen similar, think of the Indianapolis State Fair stage collapse with the severe thunderstorm that came through and blew down the stage, and how, go read the Wikipedia story about the lead up to that event and what happened. It's a fascinating story of, do we stay open? Do we not? And you learn a lot about decision-making process.
Now, Brandon, you might can comment on this, and Stephen, you may know the circumstances of the gentleman's death at Pocono, because I did a This Week in Weather History about it right after it happened in August of 2012. And my recollection is that he was standing next to a car when he was killed. Is that true, Stephen? You're nodding your head like that may
I
be
thought
true.
I thought he was standing next to a light pole in the parking lot. I could be wrong, but I can't remember. I thought it was,
Okay.
but it's been a while, so I don't know off the top of my head. But I knew he was in the
Brandon,
parking lot when he got hit.
do you know if he was next to his car or near a car?
Yeah, I
Because
have the
if he had been in a car, he would have been safe.
yeah, I have the NCDC storm event database entry for this up. It was he was packing items into a minivan.
Wow. So close. So, James, we're going to have the Jack Links 500 at Talladega this weekend. and so many times, especially the spring race, we're dealing with thunderstorms. Building a lightning proximity around any sports venue, is one of the key things we're going to talk about tonight. Every time we talk, about any kind of severe weather plan at a large outdoor venue. Talk about Talladega for a minute, James. Getting all those folks to their car in a lightning situation, much less a tornado. Ugh.
You talk about James Spann?
Yeah, James, the kingpin, James Spann.
Oh, I was going to go back to trailers in a minute, but no, I listen.
Oh,
I don't know.
coming back to trailers for you. Don't worry. Don't worry.
I don't have an answer. It's a nightmare. I mean, goodness, I look at these NASCAR facilities, and of course everybody thinks about tornadoes, but you're right. What do you do when there's a lightning strike? I don't know what the policy is at NASCAR. I know about Southeastern Conference football, NCAA football. I don't know what the policy is. Maybe somebody else knows, but I don't think the crowds are as big as they used to be 20 years ago at these things. But still, you could have 100,000 people at that track, and you got a big storm coming in with lightning popping everywhere. What do you do? Do you stop the race? Do you not tell folks to go somewhere? Well, I don't know. Will, I have no idea. I'd love to know. We have to get somebody from NASCAR on the show here.
Yeah, we do. We will have to do that. Stephen, do you know what the official policy is at NASCAR?
I can't. I know that they don't. I can't remember. I think if it's lightning within, I'm pretty sure it's with lightning within 6 miles of the track, they will stop it, and then they have to do a 30-minute delay. And if there's another lightning strike within that 30 minutes, they start the clock over. So there's a 30. It's very similar to the MLB's 30-30 rule, which is if there's a lightning strike within 6 miles, you need to have 30 minutes where there's no lightning within that 6 mile time frame. So but I don't know. And this is where I'd have to get up on the phone and call all these policies and people and go, what do you do? How do you evacuate? Do you kick them out of the whole track? Do you put them under the stands? Do you tell them to go to their car? And a place like Talladega is big. So, and they're known for their infield sort of party scene and just having a good time. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to use it to keep having a good time. And it's tricky. But yeah, and this is what we found was that we started collecting the different policies for these different outdoor gatherings, and our list was extensive. We had, well over 200 large outdoor gathering types and over 6,000 large gathering days that we looked at. And the rules were so different from location to location, unless there was a governing body like Major League Baseball, like NASCAR. But the biggest thing that we found was state fairs and how they showed up a lot. And those state fairs tend to be in areas where, if you've ever been to a state fair, depending on where you're at, you're kind of out in the open, right? And and traffic's always sort of handled by volunteers. And it's interesting how many of them popped up on our list when we started ranking some of these events, when we looked at lightning and tornadoes, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's a big problem for those sort of venues and amusement parks and concerts and sporting events and things like that. So what lessons are you promoting to event organizers?
Yeah, I think our first goal was to just start creating this comprehensive list of these large outdoor gatherings. We've seen a lot of this work in the literature that's focused on baseball, focused on NCAA football, but nothing that's looked at a large grouping of these large outdoor gatherings. So, we had our list that looked at horse racing, automobile racing, every major sport, even NCAA sports, the Little League World Series, all these sort of we spent over a year curating this data set and doing our best to sort of make sure this is a living document. And the hope is that will be something that we can share with a lot of people. So maybe that the Iowa State Fair representatives can see our work and go, oh, we're at more risk than we thought. We need to maybe up our plans or think about triage and think about what we do with medical treatment if something happens. So it's as much for the medical community as it is the event organizers. What stood out the most with our work was the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival was a big bullseye for lightning, which I did not expect. I would have put money, it would have been some event in Florida. I would have put money that it would have been, Busch Gardens or, all the amusement parks in Florida. They're in the top 10, but New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival is right there at the peak lightning season, large number of people, and that jumped out at us. And in terms of tornadoes, from an EF0 and greater standpoint, Coors Field jumps out, and we think of a lot of landspout type tornadoes. But when we get to significant tornadoes, it's Texas Arlington, right? It's a lot of the southern and central plains. And we've had close calls with Texas Ranger games before. And so it's not to, this is a first step in this work. It was really led by my senior undergraduate student, Jack Detman, who took this on and worked on this for a year and graduated and went on to bigger and better things. And I finished it up with his help. But it was trying to just create this list where we can continue to build on it so it becomes an information gathering point for a lot of these groups. And I'm hoping people reach out and go, hey, you need to put this event on the list or that event, and we'll add it. I mean, that's the hope, is that it becomes this breathing document that is for people to understand their true risk.
I love that you've done this. I mean, and as anybody who ever goes to a large event, I think we all sort of assume that somebody is looking out for us and taking care of us and making sure that all this stuff is in line, right? It's something that we see in literature about flood risk. So, residual risk is the risk that is borne by people who live downstream of dams and stuff. And a lot of us don't even know if we are vulnerable to flood threats of those kinds. We assume somebody else is taking care of it. And I think that with large venues, that is certainly the case.
Yeah.
Have you had interaction with some of these event organizers, maybe people who weren't aware, or that they were so at the top of this list? Like maybe they knew, oh yeah, we get weather, sometimes have had close calls, but like to really know that you are the top of the list of the vulnerability scale, I think sinks differently.
Yeah, the paper hasn't been out long enough. I mean, it just got published in final form last month. So we're now in the process of working on that. And I've actually kind of brainstormed this idea. Can I reach out to just cold email some of these top 10 venues and say, hey, look, here's a study that we did. You might want to think about this. And especially state fairs were really jumping out to me because those tend to be volunteer generated. There's a bit of decision making that can go on in sort of organized sports, right? The NCAA, the MLB can make decisions as a whole for the whole group. But when you get into the sort of the local events that are large, the festivals, the state fairs, the one-off parades and things, 4th of July festivals, air shows, it's a little trickier. So yeah, my hope is that there's always a plan in place and that they're continually revisiting those plans to make sure that they're the best they can be. Because, there is a bit of, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but if I get into an area where there's a lot of people, indoor or outdoor, maybe it's just because of where I was brought up, I'm looking around at the exits going, okay, what happens if something goes down? Where do we go? Because when you're in around a group of people, it can be a very dangerous situation, not just from probably what's more deadly is if tornado hit a building or something, not the tornado, but the stampede that would occur, people running, right? There's secondary risks that occur with that. And a lot of the medical communities thought about that. But yeah, I don't think we're there with this. There's a lot more that we could do. And certainly tornadoes and lightning aren't the only hazards we got to worry about. What about flooding? What about, what about geological earthquakes, right? So things can happen that are tricky. I mean, I think about like the 1988 World Series in Oakland, right? When the earthquake happened. So this has more legs than I can handle as one person, but the hope is that we'll continue to build it and expand it to not just in outdoor gatherings. We cut the line there because it was just too much to handle. But I remember when a tornado hit Atlanta during the Final Four about 20 years ago, and there was people inside during a game, and tornado hit the stadium. So taking this and moving beyond is the next steps.
So Brandon, ask your question, and then I will come back to Rick and then Kim.
Yeah, one thought I just had is as an emergency management student who's been exposed to a lot of what we've discussed tonight in some of my recent courses, I do wonder how many of these large permanent entertainment facilities, be it sports or things related to music, might not actually have an established emergency operations plan with these case specific scenarios like cities, counties, etc. do. And I'm worried how that might be a detriment in the future as we continue to build more of these large types of venues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't know the answer to that. And that was, some of the notes. Every time I finish a paper, I always write down my thoughts immediately about what to do next. And that was one of the things we talked about was I'm actually working on getting an undergraduate student to start investigating these plans and policies for these events to help us understand the range of what decision making, and maybe there isn't any. So yeah, you're right. I again, as Kim said, we trust that someone's doing something, but is that the truth? We don't know. I don't know. And the tricky part is a lot of this is proprietary information that you just can't find on the internet. It was hard enough to find what capacities and attendance numbers were and trust them, let alone their emergency management plans, particularly if it's Disney or if it's, New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. There's no documentation on it unless you're one of the two people that knows. It's tough.
Yeah, I can see this topic venturing very easily off into the 3-hour show category. Just this is fascinating as we keep coming up with other scenarios. I know this is not an outdoor venue necessarily, although there are elements of it, but we have a lot of casinos in Oklahoma, and really there's probably worst case scenarios out there. This is definitely one of them. We have the largest casino anywhere in the world in Thackerville, Oklahoma, far southern Oklahoma, just on the Red River. I don't know. It would be fascinating to know more about their plans and exactly what they would do. I mean, there's nightmare scenarios all over the country. John mentioned some in the chat too, but wow. I mean, there's just some of these that really would keep you up at night if you really dwelled on it, because I just don't know how they're going to deal with things like that. And again, that's our thing here with all the casinos. Everybody's got their thing locally, but yeah, so much to learn and so much to study for Stephen and you and others going forward about how do you plan for things like this. It's scary.
Yeah, and then something that I thought of the other day was big box stores, right? We've seen cases from work from Tim Marshall where people have taken shelter in Home Depot. I don't want to call out big box stores, and things are built out of CMUs, concrete masonry units. And what happens when the ceiling gives out? Crush, they fall on people. And my mother is retired now, but she's working part time at a CVS, and she was asking me where should I go if there's a tornado? And I said, she's like, the bathroom is on the corner of the building and there's two outside walls. And most of them, I think what they've been told is go to the cooler. It's a big steel box that you'd rather be cold for 10 minutes than be hit by a tornado. And next time you go into a big box store, look up at the ceiling and look at how much is separating you from the sky, and then think, what happens if a significant tornado hits this? Not a good situation. How cheap can you build them and how high can you sell them?
Yeah, gosh, there's another thing for maybe your future work is an interesting question about the distribution of time that we spend in structures of different kinds. And we are arguably spending much more of our lives in these less secured structures when we're going about the business of our lives, whether it be work or whether, so larger share of employment is in big box stores and larger share of our shopping is in big box stores. I remember in my graduate dynamics class, when we were doing the Bernoulli equation derivation, we learned why those are so bad. They're very, very, very terrible to be in. So, another interesting angle to all of this, when in the earlier conversation about lightning fatalities, something. Sorry if you guys can hear a dog barking behind me. There's a dog. Can you hear it? Yes, no. Okay. Well,
somebody's barking up the wrong tree. Yeah.
Somebody's barking up the wrong tree. My puppy is very incensed about something. And I think it is lightning fatalities. So I'm going to keep talking about fatalities. So something that's really interesting about lightning fatalities is that they've been going down precipitously for decades. And part of what that is about is, well, there's been a lot of speculation. Stephen, maybe you know more hard numbers of anything that's been studied about exposure, but part of the speculation has been that we're just spending less time outdoors as we're absorbing ourselves more fully in our virtual worlds. And so there's a little bit less, vulnerability for some aspects of some of the hazards that we worry about. but the time we are spending outside is probably in this larger share of time being in these big, events and spaces with lots of people where we're counting on somebody else to keep us safe rather than the day-to-day just outdoor exposure, thing.
Yeah.
And I always look at our problems in weather safety and try to think about the trade-offs, right? There's a trade-off to not being outside as much. And there's a trade-off to being in a big box store versus having some other means of buying your things. And in a world that's so filled with this complexity of life, Stephen, in just general,
Yeah.
what do you think is reasonable for us to gun for is a goal for all of this? Are we trying to maximize like a quality of life? Is safety the only thing we worry about?
Yeah.
How do you think about these problems in the context of our lived experiences? Because sometimes life comes with risk, and there's a trade-off to not exposing yourself to risk. You don't get the enjoyment, you don't get the fresh air. Where does our field try to look for a satisfying outcome?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think, speaking to the lightning death side of things, I think part of it is that we're not spending as much time outdoors, but I also think that we're now more informed about the weather in an instantaneous fashion than ever before because everybody's walking around with their cell phones. They can easily have their favorite radar app and they can get the alerts and they're more aware. They don't need to wait for the 5 o'clock news. So there's more of the information at our fingertips. So we're seeing people more willing to self-evacuate or self-control. The other thing that's made a huge difference is Florida golf courses and implementing lightning systems that get people off the course because frankly, people were tired. Courses were tired of getting sued when people weren't getting off. So like a lot of times it was, please get off the course when there's lightning. Now they have sirens and so on. So there's a lot of little things. And some of it is just better awareness with construction sites and so on. But you bring an interesting point that I've thought a lot about with tornado deaths and lightning deaths and others is where are we going to hit that asymptote? Right? Again, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't force them to drink. And it's like, yeah, you'll never get in a car accident if you don't drive, but then you'll also never maybe see the world, right? Or so there's a trade-off there. What I think you do is you have to make sure that people have safety systems that are protecting them from themselves. You almost want it to be automatic in their decision making. So, that's why we've seen the change to the warning messaging that goes out. Not just, hey, here's a tornado warning, but here's where you can take shelter and why you should take shelter. And, here's the type of thing you could expect to see, wind-blown debris and so on. More information sometimes helps people. But yeah, it's an interesting question, which is I don't know if there's ever a true zero that we'll ever get to. But what you want to do is make sure that all the information is absorbed. But that's really hard to get from a person that may not make it in a disaster. It's like you don't know what they knew and what they don't. And that's why I hinted at we need the survivability. We need that denominator. We need to understand the people in the area that did survive. What did they do differently that maybe the person that didn't make it, maybe they didn't do? And try to understand so that we can focus on not just the survivability in the moment, but the preparation and mitigation before and the recovery afterwards. So we're not having repetitive losses as well is sort of where I think we can make the biggest impact. I can't force my dad to take shelter if the tornado warning is coming towards his house, but I can call him the night before and go, hey, be aware there's something coming up. It's going to be about 2 or 3 a.m. You need to watch the local news. And maybe that's enough to get him over that hump to take action. So we rely a lot on our social networks. And maybe that's what we're doing is we're seeing people that as a more connected world, maybe we're seeing those social networks grow over time. And that's helped with lightning deaths. But I don't know. It's a tough question. I've kind of asked myself that too. And there's some military strategies too that I've talked to people about where if they're in a combat zone, you can't save everybody. It's triage. And that's a reality, unfortunately, of combat. But maybe we're in that kind of situation with disasters. It's tough.
All right. So, Stephen, I'm going to share a few comments here. I've lived this for 47 years on the professional side. Mobile homes, tornado fatalities, and I really appreciate your work. You come in with sound research that really helps us, and I'm so thankful for that. But I just wanted to share a few observations And I think we've got five big problems. And like everybody has said, this is not easy fixing the mobile home death problem we have in tornadoes. So for those that are watching, I'm showing a photograph I took in a small town called Plantersville, Alabama. Nobody's ever heard of it on this show. Nobody probably cares about where it is, but man, I do. These are my people. And trailer, mobile home, we had loss of life here. And this happened earlier this year. This was about a month or so ago. And after spending some time, and I went down to talk with the school kids. I rearranged some things to spend some time down here because I wanted to do that. And I wanted to listen. I don't want to talk when I go down there to the people. I always want to listen. That's all I want to do. So I just think we've got five problems. Number one is getting the warning. I cannot tell you how many times over and over in this event this year, people there said, I'm afraid they never heard the siren. They never heard the siren. It's ingrained in their mind. They're going to hear a magical World War II air raid siren 5 miles away during a raging storm to let them know a tornado's coming. And for these people that live in a trailer, I'm telling you, the siren mentality is still a major problem. Getting the warning is number one. And we've got to get a weather radio, Bruce Jones, in every mobile home. Every one of them has to have a weather radio. We have to move past and like it's been pointed out here, like Steven said, a lot of these counties, there's no cell coverage or it's horrible. It's inconsistent. So we've got to move away from these stinking sirens, and that is ingrained in the population. It is in their mind that they're going to hear that, and we've got to move on. And I've got to hurry because we're running short of time. Number two, it's warning credibility. We got a false alarm problem. And a lot of people say we don't. I say we do. And in some cases, in some Weather Service offices, the FAR is what, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9? You're telling me that's as good as we are? 82% of all tornado warnings are false alarms? I say we're better than that. And I hear it all. It's the Nashville case. We read it on the show here. You know, the guy's phone went off 4 or 5 times over and over and over, and nothing ever happened. And if I'm sick of it, I'm turning the phone off. And we've got to be better at that, warning credibility. Number three, it's lead time. And like Steven said, for a lot of people in a trailer, it's going to take them 20 minutes or longer to get to a shelter or some place that can serve as a shelter. And the average lead time is 12, 13, 14 minutes. So the question is, do we need an intermediate product between a watch and a warning for people that live in trailers? And if we do, we all need to be on the same page, everybody that communicates weather information. Number four is transportation. For a lot of these people, they don't have transportation. They don't have a vehicle that works. They don't have a vehicle, period. Or they've got a vehicle and it's got no gas. And it's easy for us to say, you got to get out of a mobile home. What if you can't? We have to do better for them with transportation. And finally, it's a place to go. I think we have to do a better job of churches opening up and serving as a tornado shelter. I think they could really step in and help, and I just think that's important. And one more thing, and I'll stop here. I could go on this rant for a long time. Way too many people, especially in the old school broadcast meteorology world, they shame the victims. They will get on the air and be condescending to people that live in a trailer because they say, well, you shouldn't be living in a trailer. Maybe next time you'll make a better decision on where you live. Well, shame on these pinheads. Shame on them. Listen, when I was 12 years old, I could dream of living in a trailer. That would have been a dream home for me. It's wonderful affordable housing. We've got to stop this victim shaming and do something to help them. It's on us, not them. All right, Bill Murray, I'm sorry, I'm done. Are we want to go to the recorded segments?
Yeah, but those were all very critical comments, James. And you mentioned, a product between the watch and the warning. And, for me, we're going to get into this in a few minutes. In Ardmore, Oklahoma, it's when the storms were in Texas on the other side of the Red River. I was talking to my hotels in Ardmore saying, this activity is going to come to you. In about 2 hours. So I'm giving you the 2-hour heads up, and now that was not an official National Weather Service product, but, we always talk about we're ambassadors and, we got to do that sort of thing. So they were in the mentality already when the warning started to hit. You're so right. You don't want to surprise them with 5 or 6 minutes to go. you want to give them that heads up, and we were able to do that Saturday night. And kudos to Rick's team, monitoring them, and paying attention to the radar. And we're gonna get to celebrate that Durant radar in a minute too, because it was really, really cool. But we'll come back and do that. James, you can take us to the recorded segment.
Yeah, let's do it. And again, I appreciate everybody on this show. I have learned so much. I'm just a low-level stooge here in this whole process, but everybody on the show has helped me through this. But goodness gracious, this is so complicated. It's not a magic wand fix. It's going to take time, and it's going to take all of us working together, this interdisciplinary thing. And I'm optimistic that we'll get there, but it's just frustrating because I see loss of life, here just a few weeks ago where I am. So we've got work to do. Having said that, we must take a break, and we're going to hear from Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We'll hear from Jen in This Week in Tornado History. We got the email inbox, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The Lyrid meteor shower peaks tonight, April 21st, with a second, slightly less active peak night tomorrow night. The Lyrids are a bit different than other meteor showers. First, they're old, really old. Records of Lyrid observations go back to China in 687 BCE. Don't expect dozens of meteors tonight either. This isn't a major meteor shower, like the Perseids or Quantidates. Instead, you'll see a handful of meteors at best each hour. But what you see could be much brighter. Meteor showers are fueled by dust and rock left behind by a passing comet. In this case, Comet 1861 G1 Thatcher. That 1861 part, that's the year it was discovered. The Thatcher part, that's the astronomer that discovered it. Comet Thatcher left behind some sizable debris, more so than other comets. Less like a grain of sand that drives most meteor showers, and closer to a grain of rice, or pea-sized, or even larger. The larger the debris, the brighter the meteor. The Lyrids sometimes produce fireballs. Fireballs are meteors that burn brighter than magnitude -3, brighter than Venus. The next decent meteor shower comes in the Eta Aquariids, which peak the first week of May. They are fueled by none other than Halley's Comet. After that comes the Perseids the first week of August. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, April 27th, 2011. We have numerous narratives written detailing some of the events from the April 25th through 28th, 2011 super outbreak. You can find those on our website, tornadotalk.com. One of the events occurred just before midnight Eastern Time on April 27th. It was an intense EF3 tornado that moved through central Georgia. The small community of Vaughn was destroyed. 12 people were injured by this tornado, and sadly, 2 people were killed. Just southwest of the intersection of Fairview Road and Line Creek Road, 55-year-old Charlie Green and 22-year-old Jamie White huddled in the bathroom of Charlie's double-wide mobile home. Jamie was Charlie's in-home caregiver, and she worked with him during the night. Jamie's mom, Kimberly Hilton, relayed her daughter's story to the Daily Citizen News. Jamie called her boyfriend as the tornado approached and told him, "I think a tornado's coming. We're so scared. We're in the bathroom." Her boyfriend heard a loud noise and the phone went dead. The mobile home was vaulted 100 yards into a tree line and disintegrated. Tragically, Jamie and Charlie were killed instantly.
Ooh, just maybe, we've got a little email in the inbox this week.
We have email for now. We'll wait and see what happens a little later here, but we do have some email I want to cover. First of all, we got an email forwarded from Herschel in Tennessee, who is a weather enthusiast and is going to college for broadcast meteorology with the local emergency management too, and as a storm spotter, and just wanted to say how much they love having John Gordon on the show. And I think we all can agree, love having him as the new panelist. I'm going to put him on the spot here with the next email in just a minute. And he also said he got to meet Bill Murray last year at the Chaser Summit. Such a nice gentleman. And we agree with that too. He is our favorite, the world's best guest booking officer for sure. And the next question came in. So John Gordon, answer this from Caden. What is the tornado rating of EFU? I've seen it a couple of times as ratings from National Weather Service. Why isn't it a part of the EF scale?
Yes, thank you for the question. FU gets me in danger territory, but actually FU is used in smoke, fume, okay, meaning smoke. That's the abbreviation when you look at the METAR. But uh, the FU is for tornado ratings is it didn't hit anything. We know nothing. You know, it's in a field. And I have a problem with that, but I guess if I was in Amarillo or in Goodland or something and it didn't hit anything, you got to come up with something. Because one thing, Rick Smith may smirk here. Many years ago, the Dow rated a tornado a bigger number, and a lot of us got upset about that because we don't have the Dow, we don't have a Doppler, we don't have anything. But look for it. My best advice when you're doing an EFU is to find a telephone pole somewhere, one tree somewhere to give it something. Surely it hits something, a railroad track cross beam or something. But if it hasn't hit anything, what do, Rick? It's the dreaded EFU.
Exactly. And we have one right now that's probably going to be rated EFU from Saturday night because there's just nothing that we found so far. So yeah. And I typed a nice long email response to that question. Then I realized I didn't know who to send it to. So
I know, and we still don't. Or,
I didn't know who sent this.
Never respond to an anonymous letter.
oh my goodness. We are actively working on the email thing, like right at this moment. We are working on it. So we're just be patient with us, everybody. We'll have further updates on this email thing. But I'm gonna toss it over to you all. It is triggered from an email that was forwarded to us about the fun tornado warning polygon thing that led to a really nice discussion on our email. And I'm just going to throw it to James Aladot. Do you want to kick this off? I'm not sure who needs to start this conversation, and then have Rick chime in and Bill, whoever wants to talk about the 4 separate tornado warnings in Carter County, Oklahoma, and how the confusion with it and what was actually going on with all that.
Rick, you want to go first?
Well, I can. Yeah. The question was, and it's a very valid discussion. There was a time period on Saturday night where there were 4 separate tornado warnings in effect for Carter County, Oklahoma, which is just kind of your average size, 25, 30 miles across county, and how confusing that could be. And I acknowledge that 100%. It can be confusing. The way things work, though, with the state of the science and trying to balance the goal of keeping tornado warnings as small as possible while trying to encompass the storm that we're warning is challenging. So it's going to create occasions many times in our areas that I can speak of where you do have overlapping warnings. The storms were exceptionally complicated in their development, their morphology, how they cycled, how the different motion of the storms, the interactions. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we did have that, and this is not the first time that has happened. It won't be the last time it happened. We could issue a big, huge tornado warning to encompass every potential storm and every possible motion of that storm, but that kind of defeats the purpose of a tornado warning, especially these days where we have wireless emergency alerts that are very targeted, and more communities are activating sirens based on the actual polygon versus the whole county, things like that. So anyway, James, you were watching this event closely. So what's your opinion, or what's your thoughts, and any other questions for me?
I mean, this is kind of related to how do you warn QLCS tornadoes? A 50-mile long polygon to try to catch every mesovortice? Sorry, Rick. Or do you try to pinpoint every circulation, give it the right motion? I'll die on the chroma key wall saying warn each one separately, especially with deviant motion. But it was a messy environment. The Cape was strong for April. Steering currents weren't very strong, and it was kind of a messy environment. So you knew that there would be deviant motions, to an extent, splitting mesocyclones and storms too, and that was part of the complicating factor. You already saw that behavior in Texas. So it's a tough case. I mean, yeah, you look at the map and realize it looks like a mess. However, it didn't start as a mess. That's the way I would have played it too.
Yeah, and there's communications challenges on the TV side, certainly. On our side, I mean, you start trying to expire a warning or cancel a warning. The tornado warning for Carter County has expired. The tornado warning for Carter County continues in effect till 9/15. The tornado warning for, I know it's very complicated, but other than just issuing very large polygons, in a lot of these cases with this type of environment, it's just how it is, and it's not perfect. But yeah, I was not working Saturday night, and I was not in the office, but we had some of the best warning forecasters that we have anywhere working, and that was the best way to handle it as far as they were concerned.
Well, there was no question, Rick. I was watching the storms intently, and when that bulge of wind came out of that storm, it was clear there was going to be a problem in Ardmore, and there was no warning for Ardmore because the storm had been moving up toward Wilson and Lone Grove, and we'd been telling our hotels, hey, I think this thing's going to miss you, But as soon as I saw that, that velocity coming out of the west approaching I-35, we were like, look, you got 5-6 minutes, get everybody down, get them into shelter. And then you issued the warning, which was wonderful. And I was following Channel 9, and they were covering it beautifully too. So, because we were having to, talk to our team. So I thought you handled it perfectly. It was a mess, on the screen. But, like you said, at a certain point, you just turn the polygons off and, just point out the circulations. And that was the case. I thought y'all did a great job in chat. The information Mark Fox, was out ahead of it and giving us information ahead of it too. And that helped us, confirm our actions, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I guess it's my turn now, right, James Mann? I guess we could go straight to me.
Jen, are you through? Are we done?
Jen, are you done?
I'm about done with the email.
Oh, okay, no, you're not done then. All right. I heard a big
No,
pause
I'm
there.
done.
Uh-oh, I'm probably messing something up here.
No, I don't want to promote it too much at the moment, but
Jen is sick and tired, not just sick.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the one who's been sick and tired for months. So I brought her into my pain this week, and she's quickly learned. So just send smoke signals. That's the best thing right now. Just send smoke signals.
Absolutely. We'll see those for sure. Thank you.
All right, Jen, are you clear?
I'm clear.
Well, now, Bruce Jones, we always look forward to this time of the week. And I thought it was a perfect segue tonight when, Rick Smith started talking about casinos, because it seems like you have hit every casino in North America. I think the emergency managers have been, the casinos must have gotten the emergency manager list and attracted them for every convention this year. It's good to see you're back home tonight.
Yeah, I am. I'm back home. Yeah, I've been Oneida, the Oneida Band up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's a native casino. Of course, Durant, Oklahoma, the Choctaw Casino, and then Cherokee, North Carolina. North Carolina Emergency Management was at the casino there, and I think there's been one more that I've been to so far this year. They're popular because they're affordable hotel rooms and they're nice and clean and safe. And these emergency managers like to have their conferences as a place where people can afford to go and stay. So, yeah, I've been to.
But you said an important word there, and we didn't talk about this in that last little section. And I want to ask Rick about this. So stand by just a second, Bruce. In Durant, there is a radar, and I have the little app for it. And, all of a sudden, that radar became very important Saturday night. So, Rick, comment on that for just a minute.
Yeah, one of the areas of the country that doesn't have a radar gap is southeast Oklahoma, and you can't see my air quotes, but um, so yeah, the city of Durant bought a radar, a Baron radar, and installed it a couple of years ago, and it's out there, and anybody can. There's an app that you can get to look at the radar data. And we were using that radar data a little bit on Saturday night. We were not able to, we were able in the past to get the level 2 data in GR2 and actually look at some of the higher quality data. We didn't have that ability Saturday night, but still the smooth radar data that we were seeing in the app, the velocity data was really good. And you combine that, not spoiler alert for James A's pick. There's also a station down in Sherman Denison in that market. They have a radar at Medill that captured the tornado circulation there very well. So yeah, that Durant radar really came through Saturday night with those storms for sure.
Well, it was impressive on reflectivity for sure.
Yes.
And
yeah.
that was impressive. And when you saw that, you knew there was a tornado there. But that was just that was very, very impressive. So Bruce, as we were talking to Stephen Strader tonight, one of the things that came up was, and in James's, in James's sermon, every mobile home's got to have a weather radio because, sirens are, not going to be heard in the maelstrom of a huge thunderstorm. And, then you've got the problem, all the other problems that come along with cell coverage and WIA and rural areas. And, the weather radio, given just a few technical problems here and there that occasionally occur, one-offs here and there, it's just trudging through and bringing that bandwidth to, all of the area in its coverage.
Yeah.
Talk about that for just a second, why that's so important.
I'll tell you something interesting, Bill. I was so glad to see Stephen Strader on here because I'm a huge fan of his. In fact, on the wall behind my desk at work, I've got a couple of his tables, some of his graphs from some of his research papers showing the danger of tornadoes to mobile homes. On Friday, I had two folks in my office who were getting ready to work with one of these farm and home store groups. This company has farm and home stores that start up in Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, go all the way down to Waco, Texas. They go as far east as Arkansas, Kentucky, Ohio. Probably 150 of these farm and home stores. And I was telling these gentlemen, if there's any audience or any customer base that really needs to be using NOAA weather radio, it's folks who live out on farms and ranches, because a lot of times they're out away from any kind of an outdoor siren, and they may have questionable cell phone coverage. So you're right, Bill. Here we've got in NOAA Weather Radio, a radio-based broadcast of these watches and warnings that comes direct to your home, your school, or your business from your local National Weather Service office. Nothing could be more official than NOAA Weather Radio, and especially for folks who live out in the boonies, away from the cities. When you're on your own, remember, if you're hit by a tornado out there, the time for first responders to get to your house is a lot longer than if you live inside a metropolis. So make sure that you're prepared with NOAA Weather Radio at your home, your school, and your business. And we have a special offer for the listeners of WeatherBrains, and it's a great offer. You should take us up on it because we can give you 25% off on a weather radio purchase. So these things aren't very expensive to start with, and your family's certainly worth $30 or $40. Well, we can save you some money if you use the promo code SPAN25. SPANN25 is the promo code to use, and you'll get 25% off weather products and accessories when you order them at midlandusa.com. That's our site for Midland Weather Radio. It's midlandusa.com. And if you go to that site and purchase any weather radio product, you get 25% off on the purchase. And it's our way of thanking you for being a fan of WeatherBrains. But more importantly, It's our way of getting you on board with NOAA Weather Radio so that once you have one in your home or your business, you'll see how effective these are and how important they are. And after you've had one for a year or so, and you've noticed that, my weather radio went off when my cell phone didn't, or my cell phone was late, or something else, you'll see how amazing this weather radio system is. There are 1,035 transmitters in all 50 states and 5 U.S. territories that do nothing but broadcast this life-saving weather information 24/7, 365. The promo code is SPAN25, SPANN 25, and that gets you 25% off on a weather radio at midlandusa.com. So please take advantage of this and help us spread the word. NOAA Weather Radio is America's official federal warning system. It's been in operation now for more than 50 years, and it's saved countless lives. Hopefully, it'll save yours.
Every home, every business has to have one. It's absolutely critical. Bruce, thank you so much for that message. And I can't stress the importance of that in you helping us spread the word. All right, Jen, why don't you bring in Brandon for a minute?
Hey, you bet. Brandon, thank you so much for being on the show. And it's been one of those nights where we could have gone all night with this topic. It was so important. Thank you for asking questions. And we're so glad to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about your path, and you've been loving weather for so long, and just kind of tell us about why you decided to pursue this, and now you're trying to get into emergency management. So kind of tell us a little bit about your journey.
All right, so kind of giving a summed up version of this, like you said, Jen, I had discovered when I was in second grade, all the way back in, I guess that was about 2011, I discovered the old Storm Chaser show that they had, and that kind of jump started my interest in weather. And I've been going through my time in grade school, watching the Weather Channel, following the events on TV, but I hadn't gotten too into it until I got to high school, when I was like, all right, I think I really am interested in going to school for meteorology. I toured Penn State, thought that was a little bit too big. There was a school close to where I live in Pittsburgh, formerly California University of PA, now part of the Penn West network. And so I decided instead to go to Millersville University, small little campus here just outside Lancaster in Amish country, west of Philly. And so I had started here back in the fall of 2021 with meteorology. Fortunately, had to switch out of that major in the spring of 2023 and in my sophomore year. I thought it was going to be the math. Turned out it was the physics. That just a little bit too difficult to surpass. And seeing all the stuff my roommates all met majors now working on, I don't know if I would have succeeded in that. But luckily, I had emergency management already as a minor. It was something I've been interested in for a while, because even though I switched to the major, I still wanted to help people any way that I could. And with emergency management having so much of an intersection with meteorology, I felt that this would be a path to stick on. It will be graduating with a degree in emergency management in 3 weeks here for my calendar. I was slated to go into the FEMA Corps program that AmeriCorps has after graduation. However, fortunately, I was informed last week that program was axed because of cuts and whatnot. So I'm pursuing a different path now. It looks like I just applied for a county EM position. So that's really my story at this point.
Well, congratulations on graduating. I know it has to be so difficult right now for you and a lot of seniors who are trying to step forward and like, what am I about to do? And it's there's so much confusion, and it's heartbreaking. But I'm proud of you. You have been a part of Tornado Talk for a bit, and riding with us and what have you. But Bill brought you up last week because of your website. Talk briefly here about your radar website. How did that get started, and how many images do you have on there now?
Yeah, so basically brandoweather.com. I started off when I was a senior in high school. I had spent my time during COVID, when I had really nothing better to do, looking through all things weather history. I came across Tom Grazoulis's books, came across all the different really great story maps that a lot of offices like Rick, your office at OUN, and John's and some other folks have, just really great cataloging of all things weather history. So I thought, there's really not a great centered place for people to go and find all the significant tornadoes on radar, because I really taken an interest in GR2 during the COVID era. So I decided, and I've worked over the last 4 years. I finished it about a month and a half ago now. I now have, from the earliest that you can get in the next red database that NOAA has, going back to 1992, over 5,000 significant tornadoes, both on the old and new Fujita scale, dozens upon dozens of weaker tornadoes that are also pretty interesting, landfalling tropical cyclones, derechos, a lot of other stuff like that. I also have a special section devoted to the strongest couplets on radar. I call it the VROT, or Rotational Velocity Archive, and I'm updating it every day as we get more significant tornadoes here throughout this season.
That's awesome. And if you are interested in this, please follow Brandon. Brandon, I know you're on Twitter X. You're on, and you post a lot of your radar images there, right?
Yes, I have it there.
You have a SIGTOR spotlight.
Yes, I'm there, and then I'm also on the weather_history account on X with Scott Doring from NWS Aberdeen. I've been helping him with that for the last couple of years.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Brandon, thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll all be working for Brandon one day, so let's be nice to him.
You got it.
Having said that, we got to do picks of the week. James A., if you got a second before you go, give us your pick. Go.
I do. Yep. Mine is KXII's radar from Saturday night, and that tornado, the tornadic circulation, passed about 3 miles south of the radar, near as I can tell. So it's an incredible depiction of it. The meteorologists are standing in front of the monitor wall, Steve Lenore, and taking a look at that. But yeah, it is wound up. It looks like some of the Dow imagery.
Wow.
That's right.
Excellent. Again, all this will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Troy Kimmel, give us a pick of the week. I know you got something good.
I don't really, but I do want a couple of things that I'll mention right now. Pick of the week. Folks, I'm hearing, as I'm sure some of you have, and a lot of our audience has, Kim, I'm sure you have, Rick, that we are now approaching, we now know, I guess, who has taken that second fork in the road in the Weather Service. Learning a lot of folks, even down here, that are being affected by that. So you're going to be hearing, I don't know how to say it really. It almost looks like the Weather Service is being decimated by these cuts that we're seeing. And so that's not a positive thing to talk about. But at the same time, I just found out from Tulsa, James, and I was unaware of this, that at least the Southern Region Climate Center got their funding today for another year. Rick, does anyone else know if that was, or James in Tulsa? Anybody know where that was? All of those RCCs that were shut down?
This is actually my pick of the week.
Okay.
They have all been funded.
But for the rest of this fiscal year, right?
I heard it was for 1 year, is what A&M said down at College Station.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the details of all of that are going to come through in reporting, and yeah, I think the intent is to keep them solvent.
Okay, I'm sorry I took your pick of the week, Kim.
No,
Kim, go ahead, give us your formal pick. I mean, go.
Yeah, no, it's just a news, ding ding ding, that is coming out, and just the general commentary of these are really trying times for our field. So there were a whole lot of really great scientists behind those centers that have just been dedicated to, for the most part, bread and butter industries like agriculture, water resources planning and management, Army Corps of Engineers relationships built around this very ordinary gathering of information about temperature, soil conditions, moisture availability. I think once those lapsed, then it was very apparent to some folks just how much those are relied on for so many applications. So I hate that our folks are going through this. My heart just goes out to everybody who was affected, both the people who provide the information, take those observations, and the people who rely on them. And here's hoping for a little bit more stability going forward, because man, these systems are just not something to mess with. You just don't.
Yep. One other thing, Kim, real quick, and I meant to mention this, and Rick, I'm sure will know about this, but we've been solicited. I've got weather wire up here. I've got MWIN. The folks in National Weather Service dissemination have put the word out that they're now gathering information about whether they continue MWIN or no weather wire. So I actually have stepped in on that. I wrote a big letter, but if they come after that with a chainsaw, we're all in trouble.
Indeed. All right, John Gordon, give us something good. I know you got a great pick.
Okay, so Bill Murray, the host, brings everyone here. Did you ever have Bob Maddox there?
No.
Okay. Everyone watching WeatherBrains, if you want to become smarter with weather, read any paper from Bob Maddox. Robert Maddox published all the flash flood papers in 78, 79, and 80. I put him in the chat. He went through and classified all the flash flood types, frontal types, quasi-stationary fronts. He did it all. Then he published the difference between the Big Thompson flood and the Rapid City flood. Then he moved out to Tucson. He's the one who did all the monsoon research out in Arizona. Bob Maddox, I know you're still alive. I hope you listen to Weather Brains. You are the true pioneer of all flash flooding. Everyone should be reading your papers. They're still gold.
Indeed. Great. And again, we'll put the links from the chat up on weatherbrains.com. Rick Smith, give us your pick of the week, sir.
I've kind of got a companion pick to James A's pick. My pick is the Durant radar presentation of that Marshall County, Oklahoma tornado looking from the east toward the west there. So really impressive loop showing what that really close-up radar can do with storms down that area.
Excellent. All right, Jen, give us your pick of the week, please, ma'am.
Thank you again to Brian Fowler for fueling my pick of the week, I think 2 weeks in a row now. But this is a great video I've started watching from meteorologist Nick Stewart, taking a deep dive into Florida's largest tornado outbreak from Hurricane Milton. Very interesting, taking a dive into the thermodynamic scenario and some video thrown in there too. It was very, very good.
Excellent. Okay, Bruce Jones, your pick, please, sir.
I think what's wrong with the world today, we don't have enough guys named Abner. William Abner Eddy. I don't know if you ever heard of William Abner Eddy. He was the guy that flew the kites back in the 1800s, flew them up to like 20,000 feet. And he put the temperature gauge up there, put a thermometer up there, whatever. William Abner Eddy had a train of 10 kites. They call it the Eddy kite. He invented his own kite. Got one up to about 23,000 feet on one of his things. But I've got a link to a little interesting little newspaper article about something he was doing with migrating birds at the time. So I guess if we can't do all of our upper air observations, maybe we'll have to bring back kites.
There you go. Excellent pick. Okay, Brandon, we've stalled long enough. Give us a good pick.
I wasn't sure what to go with, so I figured simply would just highlight my university's AMS chapter. I have had the wonderful opportunity to, even though I've switched majors, be surrounded by some of the most passionate, awesome, most committed weather folk in the country. I think besides the folks here, probably. I have been given the opportunity this year to be our vice president. A few weeks ago, we had our Public Weather Awareness Day, and you can see everything that our chapter does. We've got a great crew of officers coming in, so I'm hoping we'll have another great year coming next year. On social media, our chapter has accounts both on X/Twitter and on Instagram. I believe Jen said she'll put those in your picks of the week. So that's about all I have.
Excellent. Okay, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James, I'm going to take the foghorn since I just don't have a great pick of the week except for all the great guests that are coming up on WeatherBrains. When we send James Spann up into the skies on his hot air ballooning trip in a few weeks, he'll be piloted by a gentleman named Fred Poole. And Fred is going to join us next week to talk about how dangerous it is and how many people get killed doing it every year.
Oh, great.
And how,
That
just
is
kidding.
true. Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Great.
Just kidding. He's going to talk about, he's an experienced balloonist, and he's going to talk about how, meteorology plays such an important role in what they do. And he does a lot of other cool stuff too. So anyway, Fred's going to be a really cool guest. I'm not going to be available because I'm going to be on Lower Broadway in Nashville on top of one of those bars looking for a tornado warning at the Marriott convention. So if a tornado warning comes while I am at this private event we have, I will make sure to call in while I'm herding all the people into the basement. So y'all can just count on that next week. I will make sure that happens. But we have a lot of great shows coming up. Jen's got a fabulous show the following week on May the 5th. I've got the Durango weather guy, Jeff Givens. I'm really excited about that on May the 12th. Our friend Kevin Laws has got us a great show on the 19th. And then the folks who wrote the book, and James, is it okay with you if we move the Memorial Day show to Tuesday? Will that be okay with you?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Then Dan and Leslie Landrigan, who wrote the New England weather book, are going to join us. And then Max Velocity, our friend who is graduating college with his meteorology degree in just a few days now, who is one of the most successful YouTube weather folks, will be joining us. So we just have a ton of great shows coming up. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I knew this show tonight was going to be a great show. So many thanks to Stephen Strader and his friend at Villanova who reached out. Not like we need ever to be prodded to get Stephen on the show. But we were thankful for the reminder to have him on. And of course, he's always great.
Yeah, great discussion. And my pick, by the way, is the Chase Archive. If you've not seen it, introducing the biggest collection of storm chases on the web for chasers by chasers. ChaseArchive.com. So that'll be my pick. But we have been on here for a long time, but it's been a great show. We needed the time. So if you're new here, we're typically on the air every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. That's the video version. We know most of you listen. We are going to figure out the email issue, I promise. But for now...
Hi, Jen.
Yeah, Jen, her head is going to explode. But for now, still use email at weatherbrains.com if you want to get in touch with us. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
Thank y'all. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brandon.
Brandon.
for having me